Hello, I'm David D. Cosmo. Welcome to ECTV Live. I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host, Rusty Fender.
Hey, good to see you, Dave.
Rusty, hey, good to see you as well. A couple of weeks back, had my little grandson, and we took advantage of one of the great attractions here in the Lackawanna County area, and that is the Electric City Trolley Museum. And I said, you know, we've done a special show on it right here on Electric City TV, but we haven't really had anybody in to talk about the museum and the history of the trolleys in this area. And so Wayne Hiller joins us today, who's the manager over at the Trolley Museum. And Wayne, I'm glad to see excursions running again. Had a good time going up to the ballpark.
Great. Yeah.
And up to the sheds up there. I'm not sure how many people, I know I got the question a lot as a newsman in other communities. People would ask me, why do they call that the Electric City? And I know there's a direct tie-in there with our Trolley Museum.
Right. Well, we were the first successful commercial operations of electric trolleys, excuse me. And since then, we've been known as the Electric City because we were the first successful operation.
It's amazing because trolley cars in the, I guess, 20s and 30s and 40s were the prime people movers.
Yes.
For mass transit, it was trolleys. Now, when I first started to visit Wilkes-Barre, and I lived in Hazleton, by then the tracks were gone for the most part, but they had the buses that still had the electric poles.
The pantograph.
Yep.
Correct, on the top.
Okay, so
the pantograph.
so they were electrically run buses, right?
Correct.
And of course, the trolley cars, the successful ones here, were electric, but we didn't start with electric trolleys here.
No. Back in March of 1865, we had horse-drawn trolleys, and the reason being, we had the iron furnaces, and hundreds of folks, worked those iron furnaces, and they needed transportation from outskirts of the city, Scranton City, to get to the work every day. And it started then. And actually, in 1872, there was a disease that came out, and it was killing horses and mules.
Really?
It started up in Canada, came down the entire East Coast as far as Louisiana, and it killed thousands of horses. And they actually need a better way of transportation, so they came in with the idea of electric trolleys, because electric was the thing of the future.
Yeah.
And that's when we actually started our first trolley lines.
So that disease that spread among the equestrian population really kind of forced the movement, because you still needed the mass transit.
Correct. And it just spurred the folks on to go on to a bigger and better way and more dependable way of transporting folks to work. And
Did they experiment with it first year? Like, did they still have a horse-drawn trolley, and yet there was maybe one line where?
Yes, absolutely. They had the horse-drawn trolleys, but of November 29th of 1886, they invented the first trolley, and they ran. The hub was on Lackawanna Avenue, on Lackawanna Avenue there, and on Franklin, excuse me, and it started there, and they ran out to Spruce Street just on a trial run, and then the very next day they had the first successful commercial line going out to Greenridge. So it was the Greenridge line from Franklin Avenue out to Greenridge.
And a big technological achievement too. General Westinghouse made it all DC to AC and AC to DC rectified systems back then. There was only direct current back in those days, DC. They changed it into an AC, an alternating current type of system, which we still use today. So this not only changed transportation, but it changed technology in the same way.
Now, I'm glad that Rusty's here too, because Rusty is a historian with regard to local trains and such. And I know we've mentioned on occasion the Laurel line.
Correct.
Which was an electric
interurban.
Okay, but that was what they call a third rail.
That is correct.
So if you picture a Line L train.
Correct.
Where you
with its
actually
middle
had
rail
three,
was
right.
the power rail, correct. That
Okay.
was a DC system, 480 volt, three-phase, which powered the traction motors on the lower line.
So
The trolleys came first, as you said, 1886, but in 1903, the lower line, and this really ties in because the only existing route of the lower line is now what you use through the Crown Avenue tunnel
Crown
that goes down.
Correct.
So it's amazing that that part through what they call Little Virginia, back in Virginia, right off of 81, follows the route of 81 through Southside under Crown Avenue. That is the only existing route from the Chamberlain Corporation past the Brady Yard, which is now the plastics manufacturing company,
Correct.
through the Crown Avenue tunnel,
Which
and
is
down to the
4,740
exact
feet
at
long.
the time the longest
So-
in the United States. At the time, the longest interurban tunnel in the United
Yes.
States. But it follows the route, so the lower line picked up where the trolleys left off at the same time, and the trolleys kind of ended at the same time.
Okay,
1953, 54.
And the third rail, I'm gathering, would not be practical for an intercity line, right?
Correct. And that was a very dangerous railroad. Folks, back in those days, there was no television, there was no radio, before 1929. Folks didn't know, the hunters and the folks that lived back in the swamps, about this third rail. And a lot of folks on a daily basis would step on this rail to get over the tracks to go back into the woods to hunt for game and all that. Deaths were a dime a dozen back in those
Really?
days because of the ignorance of people not knowing that that is, as soon
The
as you
power
put your
rail,
foot on the
yeah.
power rail, you're done. If you leaped up on the power rail with both feet, you could walk that rail. But the second you put your foot on the ground, you become
ground it.
correct.
Yeah.
But you could walk that power rail as long as the other foot is not on the ground.
Now, to equate that with today, New York subways, would they?
Same thing, 480 volt, three-phase.
And they would use a third rail.
Correct, same system. The two tracks for the guide rails and then your third rail off to the side. But as you mentioned, getting back to your question, a really good question. When it came into town, when it came into Wilkes-Barre near the courthouse, in Wilkes-Barre, the southern terminus, and when it got to the Scranton terminus on Cedar Avenue, it used the pantograph, it used the overhead. So they had to switch to the pantograph. The third rail ended at that point, and they used the pantograph.
And they could use
above.
both because they had the
That is, well, there would be a
Oh.
cut over, exactly right.
Right.
But not in this in an area where you only had hunters, still dangerous. You didn't want to kill anybody. But in the city, that would be
Devastating.
Totally
mass
impractical.
suicide
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the city.
exactly.
But you're right.
Now, let me ask you this, Wayne. Since you already had horse-drawn trolleys in the city, I gather that you didn't need to put in a million feet of new rail. It was that you had to put in overhead
Overhead
wires.
line, correct. When the trolley line from the Electric City Trolley Museum came into existence, we had to put in overhead line, and it came in three phases. The first phase went from our museum through the Laurel Line Tunnel, just to this side of the tunnel. The second phase, several years later, we went out to the visitor center, and finally, the third phase, we currently go out to our restoration shop, which is located at PNC Baseball Field.
Right.
And
Where the
that's
rail
where
riders play ball. There's a
Correct.
separate gigantic garage there, a building, a shed, in which they've got some trolleys that they're restoring. I want to talk about those a little later on. But then the first initial job would have been obviously stringing all those wires throughout the city. How complex was the system then, do we know?
Well, it took several years for them to build that,
Okay,
and
yeah.
and thousands of dollars. We just renovated the entire line, first time since 1999. We really sunk money into the line. Some of the poles were leaning, the line was being stretched, and right now it's up to date, and we're rolling our excursions daily. I should say.
And it is a great excursion because it's not just a simple little 2-mile ride. You go all the way up to the ballpark. There is that tunnel, which is a thrill for kids, especially. You go through that tunnel, almost a mile long. And now, does you say they use a Laurel Line track? Could that ever be extended? Could it go further?
Sure.
Sure.
Actually, the tracks still exist. it goes down towards Rocky Glen area, but
Okay, where the amusement park was once located,
It
yeah.
Right
actually
along-
goes to Avoca. It
Does it?
goes on the
Okay.
old Erie. When they cross, they put the crossover in Little Virginia, and it goes down to Avoca. But yeah, they certainly could do that
I
down
mean,
to
it would
Avoca.
cost quite a bit of money
An incredible-
installing overhead lines.
Exactly.
Now, you were talking about the voltage. Currently,
Correct.
our voltage in that wire is 600 volts of electricity going through there.
So again,
to power.
your lower amperage, higher voltage, as opposed in the old days when you were higher amperage and higher voltage, lower amperage. It's the
Correct.
opposite now. So you save a lot of money on that, and you only activate that line when you use it. So
Correct.
it's a saving.
Correct. We operate our trolleys the end of April, and the regular excursions go to the end of October. And then through the holidays, we have special runs, Santa on the trolley, and different events like
And you
that.
have runs to the baseball games occasionally. yes?
Correct. This year we have 9 trolley baseball excursions that operate on Sundays, and you get your baseball ticket, your ride to and from the PNC baseball field, and everything for $20.
That's kind of neat.
It's a unique way of traveling to a game.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's fun. But the reason I ask about the potential for expansion is, picture, if you will, the possibility of coming to downtown Scranton, parking your cars, a huge lot there that's used by Steamtown and by the Trolley Museum, and getting on the trolley and going to the airport to get on your plane. Because
right.
that would be
You're right.
physically possible in terms of the track and the logistics. Yes?
Oh, absolutely. And again, you have to look, though, at the bottom line, cost effective. How many people will use this? Because it's going to be a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
This whole line from the early 1900s is over 100 years old. It all has to be rebuilt. It has to be new ballast. It has to be the different gauge rail they use now, different gauge T rail. It's a heavier rail. Like, to do something like that would be incredible. In fact, I walked that line from my house near Old Forge, Duryea, quite a bit to Scranton and back. But to re-engineer that, how many tens of millions of dollars
It'd be
just for a few
expensive.
miles,
And, to be honest with you, we are a tourist attraction. We have early 1900 trolleys.
You're lucky to have
And-
trolleys.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm
and,
surprised most trolleys were being destroyed
They were
or
scrapped
shipped
in the
to
50s.
Buenos
That's
Aires.
exactly right.
54 was the last.
That's right.
It ran through Scranton, the Green
Yeah.
Ridge section. And actually, the height of the trolleys was 1936. The Scranton Company had over 100 trolleys in operation,
Wow.
and they had 51 miles of track throughout the city.
51 miles. Wow.
And that's why you see the name Weinberg on all the buildings all over affiliated with the trolley company back then, the transportation system.
Yeah. What about the trolleys? Now I think you have 2 operational right now?
2 operational. We have 22 trolleys in our collection.
Okay.
Most of them are for display. We have down at the museum and our restoration shop, but we have 2 workhorse trolleys, Car 76 and Car 80, which carts our tourists back and forth to the restoration shop and back.
And they were both used in Philadelphia, I believe.
So they're Brill Company cars, yes, in Philadelphia.
Okay, which brings me to the logical question, to which I know part of the answer. What about the trolleys that they use right here in Scranton?
Okay.
What about, couldn't we have a trolley that was used here, used again?
Actually, we're in the process of restoring 2 trolleys. One being Car 324, which was a Scranton car. That car is approximately 90% restored. We're working on the braking system, the underneath, the seats and things like that. And there's a second car, Car 505, which was an electromobile. It was one of the Cadillac type trolleys of its time. They ordered 10 of them at the time back in the 20s, and we were able to get our hands on one. And we have that. It's up at Storebridge up in Homesdale.
Oh, okay.
Being refurbished and worked on. And we expect that up and running maybe in 2021. We just received several grants, and it's going to take about $400,000 to restore that. And we have approximately $338,000 all in grants and donations. no taxpayer money, all in grants and tax.
Now, the first one you mentioned, there's quite a story behind this. And correct me if I'm wrong, this was actually, became part of a diner. And the diner was actually it totally enclosed the trolley. So if you drove by, you couldn't tell that there had been a trolley car in there.
That's correct. That was located up in Covington. And one of our volunteers, he lives up in that neck of the woods, and it was a restaurant bar called the Trolley. And he just happened to stop in, and there was nothing looked like the trolley from the outside. And he asked the owner, why do they call this the Trolley? And he said, well, he took him to the back room, and they pulled the wall away. And in the nucleus of this restaurant was the trolley. And he saw the number 324. And being a historian, he knew exactly where that car came from the Scranton Car Company, and knew it was part of the Scranton, one of the few cars that remained from that company, because back in the 50s, they were all burnt and destroyed for the use of their iron.
People had no idea. There's no such thing back in the 50s as a collector's market. When the trolley companies were bankrupt, they went out of business, they tried to get their money for the scrap, or they set fire to them. No such thing as now people look to relive that era and go out and try and buy a trolley car. They got rid of all that stuff back then.
So
and
what,
that's
the
why.
restaurant closed then? And
The restaurant was closed. It was a bar restaurant. It was closed, and the owner was going to sold out. They were going to put a brand new mini mart gas station in that area, and Lackawanna, the Heritage Valley, caught wind of it, and they ended up, when they were demolishing the restaurant, they extracted that trolley out and donated it to the
amazing.
Electric City Trolley
Now
Museum.
they're working on one on my radio show on Saturday on 94.3 The Talker. We just had the person on, his name is Conrad Bout from
Wilkes-Barre
Great,
down
from
there.
Wilkes-Barre.
Oh,
They
my goodness.
have part of the living room of a house in Centermoreland on Route 292, which they're going to get this for the Wilkes-Barre
was a
Historical
trolley
Society.
car.
That is their, when they step into this old trolley car, it's all glass, and this is their lookout over Centermoreland. But they have to raise a lot of money. They have a lot of money already done. And if they have to get this out before winter, because the homeowner wants to close in that area where the trolley car they're going to pull out. So they got till October to get this out. So there's another one in the area, as you well know, with Conrad Bout in Centermoreland. So, you know, if you look, you can still find this stuff almost 80 years later. It's
you got to know where to
amazing.
look.
You have to know where to look.
And the other thing, Wayne, is who do you get to fix up and repair a trolley car?
Well, we have a unique partnership. We have folks that volunteer. These folks eat, drink, sleep trolleys. Without their help, they volunteer their services. They do restoration. They do displays within the museum. Our curator is a volunteer. And these folks are dedicated. They come up to our restoration shop. They help us out there. They help us at the museum. And they're just a great group of people that will volunteer their services, and we partner with them.
You couldn't get any of this stuff off with
No.
Look at the people that volunteered from Poland that came in to work at Steamtown.
Yeah.
It's amazing, from Poland.
Could still work on steam engines.
Exactly.
They have an association. They formed an association. It's called the Electric City Trolley Museum Association. And it's from members all over the country. But a big core of the members are from the Lehigh Valley and Scranton here, and very dedicated folks that help us out immensely.
How about parts? Are parts hard to come by?
They are.
Gotta make them.
They are. Well, actually,
Gotta make
a
a lot of
lot
them.
of the parts, there's other trolley museums in the country, a lot of them up in Connecticut and Massachusetts, different associations and organizations. Well, when our folks find a trolley, it may not fit within our collection because there's different gauges and things.
And the gauge would be the width of the rails, how
Correct.
far the rails are apart.
Correct.
So-
But the parts are valuable. They'll take parts from that trolley and they'll trade it with another association. They may need seats for a trolley. Well, we'll trade seats for wheels or something, and
Yeah.
they're like
Working together, hand in glove.
Exactly, and it's a community all its own, and they're trading and borrowing, and you know.
You can't get parts for a 2012 Cadillac, but you can for an 80-year-old trolley. You know, it's truly amazing.
You know where to look, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Now, the excursion is a delight, and I usually take it a couple times every year. But let's not forget that even when the excursion is not running, there's a lot to see in the museum itself. You got quite a collection of things. I remember seeing one wall there that's all gauges and switches and such.
Our volunteers, a lot of them, some of them drove the trolleys. They were motormen, conductors, and it's in their heart. And they donated their collection to our museum. Folks that are really into trolleys, they said our displays are second to none. They come in and look, we have 3 huge rooms of trolleys and displays throughout the museum. This one fellow, he's from Tamaqua. He's a trolley buff. There's pictures of him in his living room with tons of memorabilia and trolley displays. He donated that to our museum.
Oh, wow.
And it's folks like him and the volunteers that they did all the work down there.
I think the biggest name, good friend of mine, Ed Miller, the late Ed Miller. When you go in, they have a stained glass ceiling window from the original Laureline Terminal on Cedar Avenue. And he had, when they were demolishing the building, back in 1955-56, he had this entire ceiling was stained glass, and Ed Miller, from the Ed Miller collection from Pittston, he donated that to the museum. That's on display.
We have a huge motorman badge collection from all the car companies in Scranton, the Scranton Car Company, the Suburban Railroad Company, the motormen, in consecutive numbers too. There's about 100 badges. It's very impressive, and numerous displays of trolleys in the museum.
Yeah, there's one you can get on where you can actually kind of look down.
You could see the innards and the makings of the motor, and you know what the trolley is actually made of.
It really is.
We have several trolleys in our Fourth Bay area, we called. One of them was an open car trolley, which actually ran in New York City and down in Wildwood. Beautiful. And it was, when these trolleys are collected, they find them in the woods, they find them in houses, they're in shambles. They're actually falling apart, and these folks are restoration folks. They're such craftsmen. They restore these trolleys. They're beautiful, the woodwork, and
some are wood and some are metal, which have rotted out over the years. They take the rivets out and re-rivet. It's amazing to see this done.
There's also a very neat children's display there.
Yes, we have a children's interactive room where young folks, the young kids, they go in, and we have an overhead trolley line there that has a camera, and then they sit in a wooden trolley, and there's a screen, and it looks like they're actually driving and riding the trolley, and they get a kick out of it. There's blocks and things like that for them to do. But we host children's birthday parties. We have a back room area where we rent out, and there's a package where we allow folks to take the trolley and utilize the museum, and kids just love the interactive room. We have a theater there with two films, a 10-minute and a 20-minute film with the history of trolleys from their making to their demise in '54, and it's just an educational thing.
And then they can learn then about some of the history of our area.
Absolutely.
And the interest in trains is way up, because like everything else, there used to be the different lines in this area, Central and New Jersey, Lehigh Valley, Erie, Lackawanna. Now there's only a couple nationwide, Norfolk Southern, CSX. It's big business once again, so there's less and less railroads.
You can learn all that. On the excursion I took, the gentleman pointed out that the conductor's punch, when he punched our ticket, that those punches are like fingerprints. They're all unique to a particular conductor because they had to handle money, so you wanted to know who was
It's amazing, isn't it?
handling
And our
it.
trolley excursion is a fully guided tour.
Yes,
and
yeah.
There's numerous sites. It's a 10-mile round trip, like we said, out to PNC baseball field and back. And there's numerous sites that you see an old coal mine going up
Right.
through the Roaring Brook. You go over the Roaring Brook. It's a beautiful
No,
it's a
it
beautiful
really
tour.
is. What really is kind of amazing to me and so ironic is that at a time when we're talking about conservation of fossil fuel and such, I don't know what the comparison would be, miles per whatever, but the trolleys are all electric. You'd think you'd be going to that now,
Right.
as opposed to getting away from the diesel and
It was the
gasoline.
love of the automobile which killed all this mass transit when it came out, and now they're looking to get mass transit again. Look at this,
Yeah.
two or three engines pull hundreds of cars on a freight train, and now you have all these
Yeah.
tractor trailers, most of them empty. Look at the waste of fuel, which if you
It's
could go back-
amazing.
it's amazing.
Well, Wayne, I think hopefully we've generated some interest in one of the greatest tourist attractions right in this area, which is the Electric City Trolley Museum. It is operated by Lackawanna County.
Correct.
And I think it's a great thing to attract people to the area. If someone wants to find out more about the museum, what do they do?
Okay, the museum is open 7 days a week, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Our telephone number is 570-963-6950. Please give us a call, and our trolley operates Thursdays through Sunday.
You can also go on the Lackawanna County website, I'm sure, and then go into Trolley. I don't know if you guys are on Facebook or not.
We do have a Facebook
So that's
account,
another
correct.
place where you can get information.
And we're on the county website also.
Right, okay. Well, you'll see me there again.
Thanks, Wayne.
Well, thank you for having us.
Glad to have you. And Rusty, thanks so much, because
to see you,
your
Nick.
expertise on rails comes in handy. an
Well,
awful lot
especially
around
this.
here.
This is, the Lorelei in this area. Anybody who knows the Lorelei knows Scranton, Wilkes-Barre was one of
Sure,
the first places.
sure.
So this ties right
Well,
in.
I thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
And Mark,
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark McGlory. Thank you for keeping us in focus. I'm David DeCosmo for ECTV Live. Till we see you again next time, here's hoping all your news is good.